My name's Mark Walmer. I run RecordEraser.net. I'm an attorney with 35 years experience whose practice is limited and exclusively on filing pardons and expungements to remove old Pennsylvania criminal records. Vince DiAngelus is here today. I've been working with Vince for over 10 years, and he knows more about driving license restoration and how to deal with PennDOT than anybody I've ever met. And since frequently my clients have both criminal issues and driver license issues, I thought it'd be a good idea to invite Vince up here and see if we can't get some answers to our most frequently asked questions. Vince,
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's been a pleasure working with you over those 10 years. I've learned more than I can recount at this table, so appreciate that.
So why don't you tell us, if you would, a little about license restoration services?
Sure.
And what your practice area is, and just sort of an overview, and then I'll talk about criminal records a little bit.
Okay. I focus solely on driver's licensing problems, clearing driving records, fixing driver's license sanctions, which include suspensions and recalls, helping navigate the problems that are PennDOT. And my focus is helping the individual driver or working with other attorneys and legislators throughout the state of Pennsylvania.
So to me, PennDOT is just a morass of, like, I have no idea how to file petitions or what can be challenged or when. How would you go about analyzing somebody's driving history to see whether or not they could get their license back sooner?
That's a great question because it's not simple. PennDOT offers you the driving history, and everybody knows what a driving history is. It's just a record of anything that was reported to PennDOT over your time on the road. But there's a second record that you need that's called a restoration requirements letter that outlines anything that you would need to remove or get relief from any sanctions facing your driver's license at the time. And so it requires both of those records at the same time to make an accurate recount of what's going on, potential options for reduction and removal, potential relief from whatever the sanction is that you're facing.
So that sounds very similar in a way, because motor vehicle records are hard to read and hard to analyze for many lawyers as well as our clients. And I know that Pennsylvania criminal records that you can get off the UJS portal have some Latin phrases in them, like nol pros, withdrawn, nolle prosequi, and whether they're convictions or whether they are dismissals, sort of Record Eraser requires the same kind of analysis, which is what I ask people to do is go to the website and put in their first name, last name, date of birth, give me a phone number and an email address, and then I actually can run their public record for free, which tells me what I can tell them about what service they need. Now, I don't think you in the motor vehicle world have the same kind of access to that open record interpretation, do you?
I actually have a very similar process. It does require an extra step on my end. I would have to have someone go to my site and fill out a simple form with basically the same information that would complete a release that would allow us to get both of those records relatively quickly, but at a cost, and then spend the time to evaluate and review those as well as other records, UJS records, other state official records to make a complete picture of what's going on.
Right. So I remember one case that we had, I think it was back in 2014 or 15, and there was a 30-year-old man or something who had never had a driver's license in his life, and he had a string of what we call 1543Bs.
Yes.
Driving under suspension, DUI related, usually incurring 1-year suspensions on top of another, and leading to jail time. And he had a string of those, and I don't know how or why, but he came to me with an open 1543B. He was looking at jail time. You and I were working together. You said, go to the DJ, see if you can get this thing continued for like 3 to 6 months.
Right.
I'm like,
just
okay.
Needed some more time.
And then you did something with his driving history and his record and filing something, and I ended up in front of that district judge. I think it was actually December 14th. And he had his driver's license in his hand for the first time in 15, 20 years. And when he showed the judge that he had his license that you had gotten back for him,
Yes.
the judge and the trooper refused. They threw out the 1543B. They would not start that whirlpool again, that vortex. And it was a great, great result. But I think in my head, I'm remembering 17 years got knocked off of his suspension.
It was just about 17 years, yes.
And can you, how does that even happen?
A lot of the issues of this particular client came from a miscalculation from PennDOT. They took his record, and he did have a checkered past, a lot of violations, and when it was reported to the Department of Transportation, there was a glitch. And the glitch doubled one of his records. It was a 5-year revocation of his license. So he had 2 notations of a 5-year revocation. And he had no idea. He had seen his restoration requirements letter many times and didn't recognize that there was a glitch there. And it took us that time. We needed those months to be able to get PennDOT to acknowledge that there was a problem, to go back and reevaluate the record and have the record corrected to a state that allowed him to get a restricted license, which is what he was on when he came to you. And that restricted license gave him limited privileges during the remainder of that time.
Well, I'm sure he is driving for the years since then, probably like my grandmother is just being very careful, not braking. He's never going to lose his license
No,
again.
I think he's learned his lesson. And I think I still hear from him from time to time. I'll get an email saying things are going great. Thank you again. I just got a promotion. Thank you again. All the good news.
Well, that's great. Now, if there was that double 5-year suspension, we're not going to be too much in the weeds, but if they find out that the second 5-year suspension was inaccurate or whatever, does that take any additional suspensions that might have lodged during that 5-year period and knock them out as well?
Not necessarily. There is a recalculation that can occur, and again, we would have to go deep into the weeds on how it does occur. But no, even if you found an error in your record, unless you knew how the calculation was supposed to complete, you wouldn't know that something was supposed to fill into its spot or that other time would have been served. So it does take a little bit more calculating, reviewing that record. And
PennDOT makes mistakes. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, they do. Unfortunately, we've spent a better part of 22 years figuring out those mistakes and how to get them resolved.
I think another thing that's important for either criminal clients or driving clients is it's just so easy when you're pulled over by the police and you're given a ticket that you just go to the DJ and you plead guilty.
Yes.
And because of the way PennDOT has the system set up, you have no idea what the collateral consequences are of that plea. Mm-hmm. So you go, you plead guilty, maybe you have a small fine and court costs, but you don't know that there's points. You don't know that there's a suspension on a reckless driving. And then you only have 30 days to file an appeal, but you don't get your PennDOT suspension letter till outside of the 30 days.
Right up against it. And then you're shocked when you get that letter and say, nobody told me that a suspension was coming, and it's not the court's responsibility to notify you. It's PennDOT's responsibility.
It seems like a shell game to me.
A little bit. I call it the suspension snowball.
Yeah.
And it is just because you go in and you get rack up a few tickets, you go in and just decide to pay all those tickets, and next thing you know, you're getting these notices saying, I'm suspended, I'm suspended, I'm suspended, and they just continue on consecutively for what feels like forever.
It's so true. And so I don't do active criminal defense anymore. I don't do traffic citations. I don't go to court or fight about things anymore. As I said, I file pardons and expungements. That's all I do. Mm-hmm. But anybody out there, the first time you get a ticket, there's plenty of criminal defense lawyers that will give you a free consultation. We know the points. We know the offenses. Another famous one, your husband or your wife misses a month on the car insurance, and you end up driving uncovered, but you didn't know it until, of course, the police run your plate, and they know that your insurance lapsed. So they pull you over and give you what we call 1786, driving without insurance.
Financial responsibility.
So because I did drive without insurance, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go to the judge and I'm just going to plead guilty and ask the judge not to be mad at me and show him that I did get my insurance reinstated that very day or the next day. But the judge will let you plead guilty to it, and then you get notice of
suspension.
30-day suspension. And during that 90-day suspension,
90 day, yeah.
and then during that 90 days, if you drive, you start picking up driving under suspensions. The point is this. Any defense attorney that can prove you got your insurance reinstated immediately can simply go to the judge and can say, Judge, this is a first offense. I didn't know my wife let my insurance lapse. How about knocking the ticket out? 90% of the time plus, that ticket's withdrawn. There's no problems. But you only know if you talk to a defense attorney that can know the law and tell you what the collateral consequences are, points and fines and suspensions.
The best way to keep your driving record clear is to not let the violation hit the record in the first place.
Yes, you've got to fight every ticket these days because even Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and all these places, they're more interested sort of in motor vehicle records.
Absolutely. Oh, I have to have that conversation regularly with my clients because they call me asking me, how do I clear my record so that I can get a job with Uber or Lyft or DoorDash or any of the delivery driver, Amazon, UPS. Once you're in this, it's very tough to get them to release you and allow these companies to hire you because they will look at your driving record and say, I'm sorry, I see you've had these old violations, even if you're currently restored, and not allow you to work with them.
It is a mess. Actually, the criminal law to me was easier in a way because if somebody gets a misdemeanor or something like that, usually, unless it's a hardcore crime, it's relatively easy to get them probation. Mm-hmm. And usually the client's like, I don't want to go to jail, just get me probation and a fine. And you can get them probation and a fine. But then again, the driver's licensing complications are much more complicated, much more difficult. My clients' problems happen because if they get their probation, but they eat a conviction, now they are having trouble getting employment because of the extensive background checks. Now, they might have a case that was filed and then withdrawn. They might have a case where they pled guilty and got probation. And there's just so much misinformation out there about, well, after 10 years, doesn't it go away? Or I heard after 7 years, things are automatically expunged and stuff like my credit history. Mm-hmm. And it's like, just once and for all, if I can look at your criminal record, I can tell you what can be cleared and when, and they recently did a clean slate algorithm to try to hide old misdemeanors, which was supposed to be a benefit.
Oh, boy, yes.
But it's a benefit because the state police still keep it, and it can still be used against you for licensing purposes. And now what we need to do is file for a Pennsylvania State Police report to dig out the record that they so graciously hid and then file a pardon on it because any misdemeanor or felony conviction needs a pardon before it can be expunged. Misdemeanor and felony convictions need to be pardoned by the Board of Pardons and the governor before they can be expunged. Other things can go straight to expungement, but that's why we both have to look at our respective records. I need criminal records.
That is interesting. And how long does it take to get a pardon like that through for a misdemeanor record?
So it would take, okay, here's the short answer. The short answer is it depends. Because, number one, most pardons have been taking about 21 to 24 months from the filing of the application to getting review by the board to getting the recommendation to the governor to getting the pardon. About a 2-year process. Then we can file an expungement, which is a 3 to 4 month process, and then the record's cleared. But the reason it's sort of a tricky answer is because normal pardons for felonies and misdemeanors take 2 years, but Governor Wolf, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman also helped the board to develop an expedited review process so that marijuana-related offenses, marijuana, paraphernalia, and even felonies can be expedited review. So now the expedited review means the same application's filed, but the board's going to review it in as little as a year instead of the normal 2 years for non-marijuana-related stuff. The answer is further complicated by the month of September because the Governor's Board of Pardons has created a do-it-yourself, go to our website and file a marijuana-related pardon for free during the month of September without a lawyer and without much of the paperwork. And so this is what, the 13th. Like there's 17 more days to go to this. I don't even know if this is going to be seen before that month is over. But what that will lead to is either hundreds or thousands of cases that if they're filed and then September 30th closes that window, clearly the board intends to review them en masse in October, November, December, and hopefully Governor Wolf is thinking about signing them until his hand gets tired in December before he leaves office.
So you're saying there may be a little bit of a backlog in these filings because of this anticipated glut of do-it-yourself applications.
I think so. If I had to guess, what I would guess is the Board of Pardons, who just finished up the review of a batch from previous years, I would say they're turning their attention to the September marijuana-related do-it-yourself pardons, and that they will be reviewing them for the next 4 months. So while they're spending their time reviewing those, I think that's where the backlog of other un-marijuana or marijuana-unrelated offenses are being filed and not being addressed because they're waiting for this special project to get over with.
Interesting.
There's also been requests made to Governor Wolf to simply, he has general pardon powers. He could simply say, like a piece of legislation you showed me a little bit earlier before we went live, Governor Wolf could simply say all marijuana misdemeanor offenses are hereby pardoned by order of the governor. Now, if he does that, that's great. It could lead to thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pardoned marijuana records, but every pardon needs an expungement
I gotcha.
in the county of conviction. And so that's great if he does that and he clears a swath of people's records, but it's the expungement that actually erases the record. And so all those people from all those counties that get pardoned are going to need expungements.
Do you trust the state to, if the governor were to say, we're going to pardon all of these simple possession charges or all of the marijuana possession charges, to get everybody and appropriately pardon? Or would you expect a percentage of them to glitch and not be pardoned or not appropriately be pardoned?
So that's a horribly unique question, and I think you always have to expect a glitch because, I mean, in terms of data, if they're taking everything that comes into the website in September and then the Board of Pardons is personally vetting it, I think they will vet the ones that come into their database in September. I think one batch of people will simply not know this is going on and they won't participate. So they'll still need a pardon, which would probably be expedited. But I think the ones that they personally handle that create then the pardon that Governor Wolf signs, I think that would be accurate.
Okay. The reason I ask is because we have a similar situation with the Department of Transportation being told by either legislation or through an act of our government to say, we're going to modify a record, and I want you to modify everybody's record who falls under this condition. And most recently, they did this with credit issues where people were not getting credit because they did not surrender their driver's license in time. On that request, most of the records that would have been affected changed, but not all. Sometimes it required an additional review, it required an additional step, it required additional work to have the actual see that come through on your record and to get the benefits and the relief from that. And so that's why I was asking, would you be able to review a record and say, this wasn't pardoned correctly or this wasn't done appropriately?
So I can always review any criminal record to see what can be cleared and when. I'm just thinking specifically about focusing on that question of the do-it-yourself marijuana pardon project. Since that's self-initiated at the website by the user, I think all of those will be vetted correctly. But also I know for a fact, this is funny, not funny. Clients, like they just hear marijuana and they're going to the website and they're filling out the form. Now, the form asks you to state whether or not your marijuana conviction is subsection A16, which is small amount for personal use, or A30, small amount. They have felonies, which are written under A30, felony possession with intent to manufacture or distribute, and they're just clicking buttons and putting their docket number in there. I don't think the Governor's Board of Pardons intended to pardon on their September marijuana project felony marijuana cases.
Understood.
I think those will be denied, and they will still be people that need a pardon to go into the regular pardon process that will probably be expedited in the one-year review because it is marijuana related. So that's, anytime you get into the subsections,
right,
and the statutes and the code, everybody else's eyes like glaze over, and you're thinking, no, I need to know that.
Right.
I need to know that.
Specific enough.
Earlier in the beginning, we promised to answer a few questions, maybe the most popular questions we get in each of our practice area. And so, Vince, why don't you tell us one of the most frequent questions you get to answer in your practice?
Sure. Thank you. By far, the most popular question is about work license. They see my clients will see a work license ad posted somewhere. The state will have mentioned that you're eligible for a work license. They hear the courts and their probation officers talking about a work license. So they contact me and said, can I get a work license? Or more often than not, it's I've applied for the work license and I was denied. Why? And the thing that's important to remember, the work license or the occupational limited license is just one of many limited license types. There's the occupational limited license, sometimes called a work license, sometimes called a bread and butter license. But there's also a probationary license, which has a few more stringent requirements, but it's another limited license type that you may be eligible for. And then, after DUIs, there's the ignition interlock limited license or the more straightforward ignition interlock license.
And again, this is the kind of thing that you would need to look at the record and see the driving history and the restoration letter in order to get into your analysis of whether or not they would be eligible for any of those licenses.
There are eligibility requirements that must be met, and certain violations are disqualifying violation. And for the limited work license, a no insurance violation that you mentioned earlier, 1786F, fair to provide financial responsibility, is an automatic disqualifier. It doesn't matter what else happened. If you have that on your record at the time, you're not eligible to have an occupational limited license.
Brings us back to making sure people check before they plead guilty to exactly what the offense is.
Yes, or checking the record before you make application.
Okay.
And how about you, Mark? What's one of your most popular questions?
Can my record be cleared and can I restore my rights? And the answer is always the same. I need to look at your criminal history to see what can be cleared and when. The expungement statute has 5 or 6 specific things that can go directly to expungement, but they tend to be smaller offenses and non-convictions. Any misdemeanor or felony conviction is going to require a pardon from the Board of Pardons before expungement. So by looking at the criminal history, I can pull out, usually there's a misdemeanor or felony conviction, so I can tell them what the process is to apply for a pardon and quote them a fee. And then if I see other cases in the record that can be expunged along the way, I just say, oh, by the way, this can be expunged without the pardon. All right, back to you.
All right, thank you. The next question I have often is, how do I get my record cleared if I want to go and apply for a job driving for Uber, or if I want to go and get a career where I have a commercial driver's license? And it comes down to the record. PennDOT believes the record is the record. That means that anything that's reported to PennDOT, they're going to keep on that record unless they're told otherwise. And the only authority to tell them otherwise is the local court system. So we do have a team in place to help get that local court system, and we've worked together in cases like this.
We have.
Where we want to get something removed from a record to make it look more favorable to allow for one of these types of careers.
Yeah, that brings back to mind the the fact that there's that 30-day window, and yet sometimes in certain counties you can file a petition to sort of change a traffic ticket as if it was then, nunc pro tunc.
Nunc pro tunc, yes.
And some district attorneys and county offices are amenable to that, and some aren't.
And it is county by county in the state of Pennsylvania, and we cover the entire state of Pennsylvania. So I've worked in every single county in the state in some way, shape, or form. It's surprising how drastic those differences are between from one county to the next.
Yes, it's incredible. And the other thing your question reminds me of is that in our clients' minds, when they say, can my records be cleared? You and I are thinking, what kind of record? Like, are you talking about a motor vehicle record because of driver's licensing issues?
Right.
Are you talking about a criminal record? Or another one I get is, my ex filed a PFA against me and I lost my gun rights, and then we agreed that the PFA could be withdrawn, but I still can't carry. So that is actually a quasi-criminal record that might not be under the crimes code, and it may or may not be possible to petition the court to remove that disability. But I guess the point is, what I would say to anybody watching this is, we're going to dig through the records to see what can be done and when, but we're going to have to parse it down. We need to know sections, subsections, criminal record, motor vehicle record, and that's just the nature of the beast, because he's going to end up arguing with PennDOT's computer.
Right. You're going to have the entire state against you.
Well, I think the counties are happy to clear records once people get the case pardoned. Because I think even post-COVID, that everybody, I believe, wants every Pennsylvanian maximally employable. It's just a question of how to undo this legacy history that people have just dragged around behind them when they started making mistakes, and then the hole just got deeper and deeper and deeper.
The state wants you to recover and rehabilitate yourself, but they want to tie your hands behind your back to do it.
Well, that's the unintended consequence of these legacy systems. Did you have any other questions you wanted to visit?
I think I'm good for tonight. How about you?
I'm good for now. I'm going to think of some way of asking whoever sees these things if they'd like to see another podcast. And
yes,
in fact,
please.
You and I have talked about if there wouldn't be a way of scheduling something live so that people know how to, read scrolling comments, or give a phone number that we would be able to take live questions. Also, anonymously, we would always talk about any person's case anonymously, but I've thought about bringing some of the stories that I hear into the studio about just the gnarly turmoil that these records have created in people's lives. So we'll figure out how to get this out there, figure out how to do another one if people are interested.
Don't hesitate to send an email or reach out to either of us if you have a specific question you want to see covered. We can make sure we cover it at one of these in the future.
And where are they going to email you?
You can reach me at my website. It's licenserestoration.com.
I had been misstating that. I was calling it License Restoration Services.com.
That's the name of my company.
Okay.
It's License Restoration Services. My website is licenserestoration.com.
Got it. And my website is recorderacer.net, but my company is Pennsylvania Pardon and Expungement Services, LLC, also doing business as PA Pardon Services. And I can be reached at mark@recorderacer.net. But always, anytime we talk or I look at an email, I'm like a parrot. First name, last name, date of birth, email, and phone number, so I can look up your record and send it to you to tell you what can be cleared and when. And so I always need those things. Be prepared for it, and then reach out whenever you want.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me today.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure going through all of these. I have learned a bunch just from listening to you again, go through this. And, these pardons and expungements are not my area of expertise. And it's just amazing every time we sit down and talk.
And likewise, we have specific niches that we both understand that are overlapped in terms of our clients' needs, but so specialized.
Yeah, a lot of our clients have those same exact problems, and they need both issues resolved in some way, shape, or form.
You are the only service and person I've ever met or spoken to that has the ability and the desire to wiggle into that PennDOT system and actually help people restore their driving privileges.
Thank you. It has been a long road to get there.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Thank you, and stay in touch. You need to know what's on your record. Everything begins with getting criminal record research to see what's on your record and what can be cleared and when through the use of pardons and expungements. So go to recorderacer.net, give me your first name, last name, date of birth, so I can try to find your record and tell you what can be cleared and when. It's where it all starts.